Okay, 9 a.m. sharp in the United States, 11 a.m. here in Brazil, where I'm speaking from. I'm Bruna Santos. I'm director of the Brazil Institute here at the Woodrow Wilson Center. I want to welcome the people who are here seeing us. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning. What to expect of Blinken's visit to Brazil. I want to thank you all for joining us. We are excited to host this discussion as we anticipate Secretary Blinken's visit to Brazil. Secretary Blinken is traveling to Brazil as we speak, I imagine, and then he will be traveling to Rio on February 21, tomorrow, to attend the G20 foreign ministers meetings. And this visit marks his first visit to Brazil in nearly 4 years, highlighting the significance of this occasion. He's coming in a moment, as we were speaking before, starting officially this conversation. He comes in a moment, at a moment of increasing global influence of Brazil, especially given that Brazil in 2024 is the president of G20 and is hosting in 2025 the UN Climate Change Conference. And additionally, it represents a moment of or of a lot of importance to Brazil-U.S. relationship, as the two largest countries in the Western Hemisphere are celebrating 200 years of diplomatic ties. And to discuss that, we host here two very experienced ambassadors, Liliana Ayaldi, who is a former U.S. ambassador to Brazil, and Rubens Barbosa, who is a former Brazilian ambassador to the United States. The key topics we're going to discuss here are anticipating not only what we expect from the bilateral meeting between Lula and Secretary Blinken, but also what do we expect from this first G20 foreign ministers meeting. We know that as a backdrop, it's my opinion that there is a general sense that the relationship doesn't live up to its potential, and it's not being treated as necessarily an extreme priority. So this is something we would like to discuss. And also I want to highlight that while it may not grab the headlines, Secretary Blinken has already demonstrated a lot of interest from the United States in some of the priorities that Lula highlighted for Brazil's presidency of the G20, including food security and defending more resilient food systems. Brazil has launched a task force within the G20, a task force for a global alliance against hunger and poverty, which aims to establish a global alliance to garner not only resources, but also share of best practices in the world in how to alleviate hunger and poverty worldwide. It is for Lula the great interest to leave that as a legacy within the Brazil's presidency. And Blinken demonstrated in the press conference that his team delivered recently before the meeting that would be a theme of a lot of interest from the United States. Do we expect themes like Venezuela to be discussed? Yes, probably. Lula's involvement in these issues related to promoting rule of law and democracy in the hemisphere is obviously of a lot of importance, but it's important also to understand and bring a little more nuance and context to what is behind Lula's silence about Maduro and Lula's interest in finding a solution in the region that doesn't involve international actors intervening, for example. As we delve into Secretary Blinken's visit, I'm very honored then to invite Ambassador Liliana Ayaldi to give her opening remarks and then start a conversation with Rubens. It's a pleasure, both of you, to have your insights this morning with us here. Welcome to the Wilson Center, and over to you, Ambassador Liliana.
Thank you, Bruna, for that introduction, and good morning to everyone. I want to thank the Brazil Institute and the Latin American program at the Wilson Center, particularly, for giving us a space to focus on Brazil at this very opportune time. And then it's also my pleasure to share the screen or the audience with Ambassador Rubens Barbosa, a colleague, a distinguished diplomat, and someone who has really studied the bilateral relationship over time. So I think we're pretty lucky to be sitting here and talking about this long-lasting relationship. He's not only sat in the chair of actually articulating the policy in our relationship, but actually has written about it, has advised on it. I know he was very helpful to me in some particular points of when we were trying to kind of move the agenda forward on certain foreign policy matters, and particularly on the defense agenda. So it's really a great pleasure to share this space and to take advantage of this moment, not only of the visit, but also with so many of these platforms that are out there, whether it's the G20, the preparations for COP30 that Brazil will be hosting in Berlin in 2025, and the visit, which are always like anchors that provides the diplomats in our countries the opportunity to actually move the agenda. And with Brazil, as Bruna well mentioned, um, we have a robust agenda, but the potential for doing much more is there. And we somehow are always challenged to actually get it to where we want it to have it and where we feel we could have it, because the potential is so much greater. So it is an opportune time to kind of pause, and those of us who really follow Brazil and want to see a more robust relationship, look and see what more can be accomplished, and where our two governments could really mark the difference. And it's also a time of reflection. I know that Ambassador Barbosa has been looking very closely at the 200 years of our relationship, and maybe he'll share some of what he's been doing on that to really look at the various areas of alignment. And it's sort of easier to look at the cultural and some of the economic confluence, a little bit more difficult on the political side. And so I'm looking forward to having this conversation with him. So maybe I can start the conversation without taking much more time in the introduction, is to invite Ambassador Barbosa to share with us what he sees as the how he would characterize the bilateral relationship currently between the United States and Brazil, before we get into some of the specific issues. Maybe I can start with that.
Well, good morning. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very pleased to take part in this meeting because, as you may know, when I was ambassador to Washington, I helped to create the center, the Brazilian Institute in the Woodrow Wilson Center. So it's the first time being here in Brazil that I take part in a meeting hosted by the Brazilian Institute. I'm very proud that the Institute is still there discussing areas of interest between the United States and Brazil. Well, replying to the question, I think that the Brazil-United States relationship now passed to a very challenging moment, perhaps one of the most challenging moments in our bilateral relationship. The world has changed, Brazil has changed. We are in the middle of two wars. We are in the middle of a confrontation between the United States and China. We have a new economy. We have a new global order. And the priorities of the United States don't include Brazil or even South America. In Latin America, the United States has two or three interests: immigration, drugs, violence, in some aspects, democracy. But I don't think that the region outside, especially immigration, outside this issue, is in the radars of the State Department and the U.S. government. So that's why I say it's a very challenging moment, because Brazil, like the United States, and this is another point that I want to stress, it's very interesting, the similarities of what is happening politically in the political scene in Brazil and in the United States. The division in our country, in our countries, are there. The political difficulties derived from the polarization are there. So I think that we have many things to discuss in our relationship, but I think that at the moment, like as Secretary of State Blinken visit to Brazil will show, the interests are very limited. I mean, during the G20, the agenda will include global governance, will include poverty, will include environment transition, and in the bilateral area, we have 2 or 3 issues of importance. I think that bilaterally, the trade relationship, the economic relationship is advancing, but not as Bruna said, as it should be expected. But as I said, the world has changed, and in the changes that are taking place in the world, the Brazilian economy, the Brazilian foreign trade, the Brazilian attraction of investment is not, in my view, is not high in the agenda of the U.S. administration and U.S. companies. The investment is declining, and it's the United States in the last 20 years has left has declined its interest in the region, opening a space for China. This is the reality. China today is the main partner of practically all countries, perhaps with the exception of Colombia and South America. Mexico became the first partner to the United States. So in Latin America, the only country that is making the most of the changes that are taking place in the world is Mexico, for a number of reasons that we're not going to discuss here. But in terms of U.S.-Brazil relationship, we have now two or three important issues that I imagine that are going to be discussed on a bilateral basis. Not only the agreements that Biden and Lula signed during last year, the cooperation in the labor rights, the cooperation on environment. These are important areas that we may expand our cooperation. The cooperation in the Amazon region, in terms of cooperation, financial cooperation. This is another area of interest of the 2 countries. And in the political area, you have the question of Venezuela. Not only the domestic question, democracy, elections, but also the Guyana question. And you have Haiti. This is in the agenda of the United States, how to to create a security force to try to manage the situation in the country. So these are the main points that I think will be discussed. We are celebrating now the 200 years. There will be an opportunity to discuss what has happened with our relationship during these 2 centuries, and also to reflect a bit on the future of our bilateral relationship. As I said, we are experiencing a very challenging, and I don't know how to overcome the difficulties that we are experiencing. And one of the points that I think have an impact on our bilateral relationship is that we couldn't, neither the United States nor Brazil, could find points of common interest. The United States wants to export to Brazil, to invest in Brazil. Brazil wants to export to the United States to increase the cooperation. But we think unilaterally. We don't think on a common basis. We have to find, and there are, I have already discussed this, there are a few areas in which we could find areas of interest. A strategic interest for the United States, a strategic interest for Brazil, but these are so far these are not being discussed. So to start with, I made these provocations, no? To our talk. Challenging times, lack of interest of the United States in the region, complexities of the Brazilian society, U.S. election, which could have a tremendous impact not only in the region but in the global situation. These are the times we are living in.
Well, you have certainly laid out a number of complexities in the relationship. Nevertheless, I'm the eternal optimist that particularly with times where we have these forcing events that we have to sit down or there are opportunities, whether it's the G20. There are some areas within this building a just world format or goal that we could take advantage to sit and talk about some of the challenging aspects of our relationship to try to expand. So if we look at just the trade side, you mentioned that this is investment is declining, and certainly the competition with China has made it more difficult. But what could be done to improve or increase the trade flow? Trade is not a popular theme with the current administration, but nevertheless, we have U.S. companies that have been in Brazil for hundreds of years, and they see Brazil and its market as important. What could be done to actually have that grow, as opposed to letting the dynamics of the moment and its complexities sort of take over? What more should be done by having a sit together and come up with an agenda that would actually increase that flow without talking about trade agreements, but whether it's in the context of the CEO forum and other dialogues that have our sectors, our private sector sitting together. And I know you're engaged in a number of private sector entities that look at these issues, so we would benefit from your insights on looking at, okay, it's not a good situation, and the context globally is certainly complex, but what could we be doing better to increase that interest and attention and engagement by the private sector in Brazil?
Well, the difficulty, as I said, is that U.S. companies are not looking into opportunities in South America in general. Why? Because the U.S. government, rightly so, has started an industrial policy that is of great importance, and with protectionist approach. This makes difficult for Latin American countries to discuss concrete points with the U.S. companies because, as we know, the Department of Commerce has not influence in the decision-making process of private companies. Private companies have to be interested to join, Brazilian companies to make joint investment to this, because there are many opportunities here. But if the United States doesn't come to Brazil, China will come, Korea will come, Asia will come. And Brazil, as I said, is in the middle of a dilemma because nobody disputes that Brazil is a Western country. Now, our values, our principles, we are very close to the United States. But now, in the last 15 years, given the changes in the world scenario, Brazil is very dependent of Asia. You know that more than 50% of our export goes to Asia. 37% of our egg exports go to China. So it's very difficult, for us to change this situation unless there is a strategic approach. This is one of the recommendations that I could give. A strategic approach in certain areas. I will mention 2 or 3 areas. For instance, the question of minerals, rare minerals, strategic minerals. Brazil is a producer of a number of minerals that are of interest, strategic interest of the United States. Why not to discuss partnerships with Brazilian companies? This is one area. Another area for U.S. companies, not for the U.S. government, for the U.S. companies. South America is over 400 million people. Brazil is not in a position, neither any other South American countries, to dispute, to compete better, to compute the global chain of values that are changing, going to Mexico, going to other countries. But we could discuss with U.S. companies, with Brazilian companies, regional value chains of value for industrial goods. Brazil has approved recently a new industrial policy. This will open tremendous opportunities in high tech, in areas of more advanced, in modernization of Brazilian companies. But this is private. If the United States companies are not interested, we have a queue here of other countries interested in taking part because we have 200 million people market. So that's why I'm saying that it's a very challenging moment, not only for the political reasons, but because we don't have a strategy. The United States has not a strategy in relation to Brazil, and Brazil has not a strategy in relation to the United States. And now, with the Workers' Party government, the situation is much more complex because there is an ideological ingredient that is in place. So I think that some areas should be identified in those dialogues you mentioned, the forum And in the political economic dialogue that exists between Brazil and the United States, they should identify all areas of common interest. But this has not been done, and I don't think is being done now. In the future, if this is not done, I am afraid that China will increase its presence here in the region. And that there is another point very interesting that we should take into consideration. China is not attaching conditions to the trade increase. There's not political influence of China, ideological influence. They're not interested. They know that this is an area that is under the US sphere of influence. They're not disputing that. They are just occupying the place left by US companies. In energy, for instance, China has most of the transmission lines here in Brazil. It's an economic area. Not that Brazil has given to China company. They won tenders, licitations. They won these projects. And now I mentioned this new industrial policy that has been launched by the Brazilian government with Geraldo Alckmin, the vice president, who is the minister of industry. This is a big opportunity for US companies. But as I said, US companies are looking inside because of the incentives, because of the industrial US policy. And I doubt that many companies will be interested. And I'm speaking this not only theoretically. Since I left Washington, I created a consulting company here and on business. And I know that the lack of interest of U.S. companies is there. If there is not any strategic perception from the United States, because Brazil and the United States, taking apart aside Mexico because of the vicinity, because of the important the agreement that Mexico has with the United States, in Latin America, the country that matters most to the United States, in my view, should be Brazil, because Brazil could influence in the region here, even in the BRICS. If we could see that Brazil is the only, now with the expansion, Brazil is the only Western country there. Instead of criticizing BRICS and Brazil, we should help Brazil to stand up the trend that will develop inside BRICS, anti-Western, that I think will happen. So there are many strategic opportunities for both countries, the two largest countries in the region. But I'm afraid that until the new government takes office, depending on who is going to be the president in the United States, I'm very pessimistic that any changes, strategic changes, may occur.
Yeah, I would add in terms of generating incentives and a strategic framework. I think there's a tremendous opportunity in the area of food security, which is, the United States and Brazil are two of the largest food producers, and there's a lot of innovation that's going on, and it is a G20 focus in terms of relieving hunger, and so there's things that can be done, but it requires, like you say, strategic framework. It requires incentives, because business will go wherever it's more convenient, and of course it's more economically healthy for them. If I may switch a bit to more of the political angle, and that is trying to understand Brazil's political stances on some of these crises in the world. President Lula has made some very controversial comments, and in terms of the war in Ukraine vis-a-vis Russia. Certainly, Gaza, the crisis in Gaza, Israel, Gaza. More recently, the comments on the opposition, the Russian opposition, the death of the opposition leader Navalny. These are all things that make the bilateral dialogue prickly and complicated. And how are these issues being seen internally, and how do you think these contribute can how can we move forward on these issues? And you know better on how what the impact of this is on our foreign policy agenda. Could you expand a little bit more about these controversial positions that Brazil has taken vis-a-vis, where the United States stands?
You know that in the last 4 years, in the previous government, at the beginning with Bolsonaro, there was an alignment with Trump, not with the United States, with Trump. And we produced a very important result, the approval of the Strategic Technological Agreement. This was during the first year of Bolsonaro. After that, nothing has been done. And when Lula came to power here after the election, very close election, he made 3 points as priorities in foreign policy. First, Brazil should be back to the world scene. Second, environment and climate change. And third, Latin America, South America. These are the priorities of the Brazilian foreign policy. The problem was that, in my view, in the first, Brazil should be back to the international scene. This means a more active voice in the multilateral organizations. This means in all areas, including cultural, including gender, abortion, in all areas, not only political, economic areas. And in the WTO as well. I mean, Brazil should have his voice heard in the world scene. The problem is that President Lula has, in my view, started trying to have his voice heard where Brazil has not power to do so. He tried to punch above its weight, trying to influence the war in Ukraine, the war in Gaza, and there are limitations. We should recognize that Brazil, in terms of foreign policy, has no power excess, has not strength to interfere in this area. On the contrary, we are very strong, and we are a power, a world power, in environment, in food security, in energy transaction. We should concentrate on these areas. This should be a normal thing to do. But the changes in the world, the wars, they interfere in this idea of trying to concentrate on areas in which Brazil is strong and can say something. Because you cannot discuss environment without including Brazil. We cannot discuss food security without including Brazil. Now the president included the question of the fight against poverty, which is a problem in the world, and it's important that Brazil would have a voice because of the ag production here. You know that Brazil has 10 of the as number one producer of 10 ag products in the world. And Brazil is at the same level, the Brazilian production at the same level of the United States, of China, and of Europe. So there are four big countries, big regions that supply the world. And Brazil is one of them. This is a fact. It's not disputed. No, this is a fact. And so we are now in a difficult position because the traditional position, the Brazilian position, as you know, having been ambassador here, is that Brazil traditionally wants to have an independent position, autonomous position. In the war between Ukraine, Russia and Ukraine, we should be following without interfering. With the war in Gaza, we should stress our position that now apparently the United States is beginning to support the creation of the two states. This is a traditional. No? A Brazilian was head of the General Assembly of the United Nations when Israel was created. We are at the beginning helping to create the state of Israel. We have a long tradition of support of these two-state solutions. And we should focus on those areas as an independent, with an independent position. We shouldn't take sides between the United States and China. We shouldn't take sides between Israel and Hamas. We should defend our own interest. And this is a problem that we are facing now with these statements, last Sunday's statement, and the repercussion here in Brazil and Israel. Because as I said, Brazil has not a strong position in the world. These statements had no repercussion whatsoever. Nobody cared about what Brazil said about Israel. Israel is using this politically, internally, and externally against Brazil. And Brazil, the president said what he said, and now we're trying to managing that, to try to see what can be done to minimize the consequences. But the world is not looking into this. No, this is a Israel-Brazil, a bilateral thing that should be discussed and solved in medium term, because this is a question between the Brazilian government and the Israeli government, not between Brazil and Israel. I am afraid that in Israel, the government will not last very much time. Soon, well, there will be changes there as well. And we have a Brazilian government here for the next 4 years. So we have to arrange the situation, as I said, in relation to the United States, in relation to Israel as well, because the interests between Israel and Brazil are not limited to the relationship between the government of Brazil and Israel. There are concrete interests in technology, in industry, in defense, in a number of areas. And this is not going to be affected. I don't think it will be affected. So even if Brazil has independent stance, not align itself with the US position in some areas, the interests between the two countries are much bigger, much stronger, and should go forward. And if you look into the 200 years history of our relationship, there are ups and downs. And so, but the relationship is stronger. Whenever the United States, this I repeated in Washington and when I was there, maybe differences, maybe questions here and there, but when it comes to crucial interests, Brazil is there. Brazil was there in the Second World War. Brazil is there in September 11th. Brazil, when it matters, Brazil is alongside the United States. But each country has its own interest. Brazil has its own interest, and at this stance, there's no possibility of an alignment with the U.S. positions in everything. This has to be taken into consideration.
Thank you. Now, um, what about switching to more regional issues where Brazil does have an interest? Certainly, if we look at Venezuela, there is a border between Brazil and Venezuela. There are some longstanding relationships. So more of the regional role that Brazil can take. Yet there's silence on the Venezuela matter. How do you see that? How would you explain that part?
Well, I've been very outspoken here, writing and speaking, that Brazil should do abroad what he do here. We defend strongly democracy here. We should defend democracy abroad. I've been repeating this. So for me, it's very difficult to understand why Brazil is silent in relation to what is happening in Venezuela, and why Brazil should not say something in relation to what happened with Navalny in Russia. It's very difficult to understand. So I think, but Brazil, the government's idea here is that we should not make noises against Venezuela to preserve our influence there. I don't know if we were right, because we have to see Venezuela signed the Barbados Agreement with the United States. Brazil was there, but it's not fulfilling all the pledges that have been included in the agreement. The question of Guyana as well. Brazil is trying to interfere, to moderate Venezuela's position. So far, there was a meeting here in Brazil. We've been successful, but last week, for instance, there were new actions in Venezuela against Guyana. So it's very difficult, our position, and the same thing with Argentina. We have great interest in helping Argentina, and in relation to Venezuela, you know, I made a research, and Brazil is much more interested than the United States to have a peaceful transition to democracy in Venezuela, because we have concrete interests in the economy, in the financial area. There's a tremendous debt, Venezuelan debt to Brazil. We have trade, we have refugees, Venezuelan refugees in Brazil, over 300,000. I mean, I made a study about this. Our interest in relation to Venezuela is huge. So we have to be careful, but we have to acknowledge results of what we're doing, because I don't think that outside Colombia and Brazil, any other country can have influence. And in the case of Venezuela, I wrote a piece a few months ago saying that what is lacking there is legislation that has been approved in nearly all Latin American countries with the military dictatorship. Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, Chile, all countries approved the legislation with amnesty. We should discuss this. There is a very good U.S. proposal to democracy, but it's lacking this. It's in the proposal that the United States presented a year or 2 years ago. is lacking this. How you make the present rulers in Venezuela help to make the transition. The military in all our countries accept the transition because they had this legislation, the amnesty, all of them. So it's lacking, in my view, this to try to speed up the transition and the democracy and the elections, transparent elections. But what we are seeing is the contrary. You see the restrictions, the several restrictions in the last month or two to prevent an election to be transparent, with the opposition practically wiped out. There's no opposition in Venezuela like in Russia, and we should be as vocal about this as we are vocal here when we defend democracy, especially after what happened in 8th of January here in Brasilia, like what happened in Washington 2 years before.
Thank you. No, it is perplexing to see the silence and no statements made with what's happening there. And what about Haiti? Brazil has had a trajectory there with the peacekeeping missions, and do you see Brazil playing a role again in trying to stabilize the situation in Haiti?
Look, in the last few years, Brazil has had a very important role in Haiti. Brazil had was the commander in chief, the operations in Haiti. But the previous government and this government changed the position. I think that we are supporting in the United Nations, we are supporting the US position to the creation of a security force there. Kenya is leading, but I don't think that in the current situation, Brazil will send troops there. I don't think that they will do that. We'll give political support. We'll do whatever we can, but I don't think that we'll engage in military personnel there as we did in the past.
I'm going to try to take some of the questions that are coming in from the audience. One is related to energy. Can Brazil be a leader in energy transition while simultaneously expanding oil and gas exploration and exports? Are domestic energy transition goals enough?
I think so. We see all countries in Europe doing the contrary that they are promising. Even in the United States, a few policies are against this Green Deal, as they call in Europe. Even the protectionist measures that Europe is taking is against the rules. But I think the priority is here, and especially in relation to the Amazon, the preservation of the Amazon and the transition. Brazil has the cleanest energy mix in the world. So I am favorable to the research that is being asked by Petrobras in the north of near the equator, near the Amazon. The United States is exploring oil companies, not Shell and others, are exploring oil in Guyana, in the sea. In Suriname, France is doing the same thing. Why France and the United States can do that in the Amazon and Brazil can't? I think that the reserves we have in the north, in the northern area, from Suriname to Rio Grande do Norte, all this area is not in the continent, is in the sea. For you to have an idea, the well that is being asked by Petrobras to be researched. It's not the exploitation. It's just the research. It's over 250 miles from the mouth of the Amazon. What is impact? What will be the impact on the Amazon? Zero. So I think that the northern part of Brazil is the poorest area in the country, and if there is oil and gas there, we should explore. Other countries are doing the same, but the commitment to preserve the Amazon, to make the transition to a cleaner, renewable energy is there. Brazil is leading in this matrix, or as they call energy matrix, as the cleanest country. We are doing ethanol. We are doing a number of areas. Now there is a plan that is being discussed of a transition, ecological transition for industry, the green transition in industry as well. So Brazil is committed, as I said, this is one of the areas that we are committed. The fact that we may explore oil and gas in the northern area has nothing to do with the commitment. It's like in Europe, like the United States are doing.
Are there other aspects of our environmental agenda where the United States and Brazil could be, where you foresee that we will be doing more together and coming to some sort of agreements in preparation for COP30?
Yeah, I was going to mention that in the COP30, we're going to discuss this. The COP30 will be held in the Amazon, in Belém. And so people can be what I think that this in the Amazon there is another this is another area of cooperation that is not being explored by U.S. companies because of the biodiversity of the region. Now many things leave the Amazon by contraband, illegally, through organized crime, and through companies that are there buy or take away things from there without any payment. So if companies could be set up there in the Amazon and to produce there using biodiversity, this would be an important sign of cooperation. I think that this should be discussed because we are very, very interested in the bioeconomy, to develop the economy in the Amazon. There are nearly 30 million people living there. I am helping a European company with land in the Amazon, a huge area. They are going to develop, preserving the Amazon, helping the local population, helping with trades, with industry. There are opportunities there, preserving the legislation, preserving the forest. No, the problem is that in the last few years, especially in the previous government, the legislation has been neglected. And there was a tremendous increase in the deforestation, fires, and illegal mining. Now we are fighting this. The government is serious. There is new legislation to prevent gold contraband. That Brazil is one of the largest gold exporter, practically all until now illegally. European companies, American companies buy this illegal gold. So it's a very complex situation. That's why I mentioned at the beginning, a strategic approach should be attached, should be discussed to improve our bilateral relations. In any area, we're not mentioning here defense. This is another area that we could discuss. The chips question. Why Brazil is interested in developing chips company? Of course, not the the latest, not the strategic military, but basic, the first chips. Why not to have American companies to join Brazilian companies to produce and to export to the United States? So there are areas that, if you think strategically, could be developed and improve tremendously our trade. The last year, trade improved a bit. Our exports and imports increased, but it's very little. Very little. It does not correspond to the potential of the two countries.
We always seem to go back to that statement. The potential is much greater. I'd like to get one last question in from the audience, and this is from Kelly Mayman Hawk. She says, as Ambassador Barbosa reminded us, Brazil has a long history of non-intervention, yet has always had an outsized global policy impact through its leadership in global institutions. And President Lula historically used the BRICS concept as a construct to highlight and grow South-to-South coordination. With the situation in Russia and the expansion of the group, is it still relevant? Is it still a relevant mechanism to Brazilian interests?
I think that with the expansion, Brazil was against the expansion. Traditional position of Brazil was against the expansion. At the end, the current government decided to accept China's proposal to expand BRICS. I think that so far BRICS has been not considered, has been left aside. But I think that we will be hearing from what BRICS will do in the future. I think that contrary to what the United States is proposing, dividing the world in democracies and autocracies, the trend, in my view, perhaps is too soon to say that, but my view is in the next decades, we'll see the world divided between Western and non-Western countries. And the BRICS is the core of this. BRICS will expand and will be the force against Western values, Western everything. So Brazil is in a very difficult, in my view, is in a very difficult position because with 5 countries, Brazil was the only Western country with democracy, with Western values. Now, Saudi Arabia is there, Tehran is there, Ethiopia is there. So, and we will expand more. I think that the BRICS, I read the other day that there is a line of nearly 60 countries asking to join BRICS. So it will be a group that will be heard much more in the future, I think. But Brazil is in a difficult position. Nobody discussed this in Brazil because we are in the early stages of this. And Brazil perhaps will have to do what India does. I think that the most efficient foreign policy in the world today is India. India is in war in the borders with China, has joined BRICS, has been allied to the United States in the South China Sea, is everywhere. China is everywhere. India is everywhere. I think Brazil has to do the same thing.
It's a great statement on which to wrap up. I think we're about 1 minute away, but I just wanted to highlight that you have been engaged in a project to review the bilateral relationship over the last 200 years, and that's something that will be coming out soon. And you want to tell the audience in 1 minute what that project is about, since we have you here?
Well, in the context of the celebrations of this 200 years, a book is going to be printed here in Brazil with a translation in English. And I was asked to write a piece, a short piece, 10, 15 pages. It's not large. Each article is not a big article. It's a direct focus directly the question. And I focus directly the relationship between Brazil and the United States. And I start the article disputing the date, because we are not celebrating, my view, after the research I did. Both the State Department and Itamaraty are wrong about the date. The date, the bicentenary, is not in 2024. It's in 2025, because the agreement between the United States and Brazil was signed later, 1825, 3 years after the independence. But this is just the first page. There are other 10 pages describing our relationship, ups and downs on our relationship since the empire. And it was very interesting. It's just one point. You know that in 1810, 1820, the United States was an agricultural country. There was no industrial revolution there. It's an industrial country, cotton and with slavery like in Brazil. We have many similarities. And the United States, given the Brazilian position as a kingdom with an European king linked to the European power structure in Europe, the leadership in the United States feared in 1810, 1820, that Brazil would challenge the United States in the region. And the United States had a policy to interfere on Brazilian foreign policy in the southern cone, with Argentina, with Paraguay, with Uruguay. And this was very interesting. I learned a lot reading and writing about this. And you will see, I think that the article will be very controversial, because many things that nobody discuss. And I think that the past explains a lot our position today. It's very interesting.
Thank you, Ambassador, for sharing that with us, and thank you for being here today, and for all your insights. For those of us who want to see a more robust bilateral relationship, we can understand more of the nuances, and we'll continue at it and try to make it grow. Thank you so much, and we'll look forward to having you again.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very pleased to take part in a meeting organized by the Brazilian Institute of the Woodrow Wilson Center. Thank you very much.
Thank you.